Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program, let's talk about something that people look to the future, but you need to realize that it's here and it's starting now, and that is 3D printing. Today on the program, we're going to be talking with Evelyn Eaglesong. Her book is Inked, The Future of 3D Printing, and we're going to find out what is this amazing technology, what direction can we expect it to go, and most importantly, if it's here to stay, how do we participate into it? I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Evelyn Eaglesong. Evelyn, how are you?
I'm great, Daniel. Thank you for asking me to be on the show.
Is this a 3D printed voice? Are we able to do that?
Very close.
Now, I was just recently, I'd say about 2 weeks ago, they were doing a simulcast of the space shuttle and the astronauts that are up there in space, and it was really interesting because they were talking about having the 3D printer on board, and that the one astronaut was able to actually make a ratchet. They also went on and he said, I was able to make a mason jar, and it was just really amazing to be able to use this thing. And I'm thinking, it's pretty amazing that here you're kind of hearing about it by watching a program on a cable station, but really it isn't something you hear a ton about in mainstream media. Tell us about it.
Well, one of the reasons why I wrote the book is because what's about to happen shock most of the world. Millions have no idea that printers now have the capacity to print food. And talking about NASA, I actually ran into a gentleman at the coffee shop that I write, because I'm a writer, I'm eccentric. I go to this particular coffee shop called Cafe Delirium to go write. And I met this gentleman who happens to be a protege for NASA. And he was mentioning that NASA has been working for quite some time on printed food. The other thing that we're looking at is, drugs can be printed. We've got some bioprinters doing things like this. We've got guns that have been printed and actually work. We even have homes that have been printed. Trying to describe to, what 3D printers do, basically it's like trying to describe to the pre-computer generation exactly what computers can do and will do and how they will change the lives, really, of the entire world. Because years ago, computers were like room size, Daniel. I mean, no one could imagine you would have a desktop or even a laptop. So basically, my book, Inked, is a way to prepare people for what is not just coming, but for what's already here. And there's about 8 companies that currently are the leaders in 3D printing. And just like when Apple started, or Microsoft, or Google, having stock in any one of these would have made you a fortune. But compared to 3D printer, it's going to look like kindergarten.
Kindergarten, really?
Yeah, like spare change, because 3D printers, the immediacy, the specification of 3D printers, having stock or options in any of these particular companies is highly recommended.
Well, it's always funny when you hear people talk about people, businesses like Microsoft, Apple, even Intel. And, gee whiz, if I'd only known about it. Well, the reason you don't is because you really weren't wrapped up in that technology because it was still relatively new, And it's funny when you hear people after the fact, I wished I would have invested my money into that, as though they knew that they should have done that, but they just decided to do something else. And, and just on the investment side, Warren Buffett never invested in Intel, even though he had that ground floor opportunity offered to him, and he simply just didn't understand the technology, and that's why he stayed away from it. But this one here seems to be that kind of technology that once it's put in front of you, I think, this day and age, people have a pretty good handle on what it's about, won't they?
Yeah, they actually do. I mean, once you have, there's a gentleman in Texas that the government's been after, but he's an attorney, so he's a young man. He's able to get away from a lot of things, but he has been responsible for printing guns and rifles. And I mean, we're looking at the Yakuza, the Yakuza in Japan. They don't need to go to customs, anymore. They can print their own guns. That's how serious this is.
Hmm. Now, that's the other thing, too. Now, how did you first come to know about 3D printing? What interested you, and how far have you taken what you've learned to discover what it is to describe to people?
Well, this is interesting. I'm glad you asked that, Daniel. My book is really, the reason I say prophecy or fiction is because my book is a prophecy written in fiction form. But the truth is, it's actually my version of the truth of a vision of a prophecy that I received. As a visionary, I had predicted certain events such as earthquakes in South America and many other, things like 9/11. So I work I'm a reader at New Renaissance Bookstore, and I've read internationally. And so it's easy for me to have these visions and, things that come to me. But I started seeing in this vision organs, human organs, and human organs, by the way, are already being printed, like hearts and kidneys. And I thought, well, that's amazing. What else? So I opened myself to receive this information, and I realized that if human organs indeed are being printed, and they are, that would save the world, many people, as far as human trafficking. That would reduce, if not eliminate, human trafficking of organs. And so I continued to be open to receive more information, and that's when I started doing some, quite a bit of research. It's taken me about 2 years to write this little 100-page book, but it is filled with veiled information that if you really pay attention, you'll be able to know that this is not going to happen in the future. This is happening right now. There's vehicles, cars that are printed.
Right. Now, here's the thing. You had mentioned in 3D printing. Let's talk about the basics. How does it work? What does a 3D printer look like?
Well, there's two types of 3D print. I can't specify both of them, but they have certain names like Form Labs. The company Form Labs is another one that people would like to take a serious look at. Form Labs went the other way, and they have a certain type of printing where it prints differently than a regular 3D printer, like MakerBot started with the 3D printers like that. And so with the technology that Form Labs is using, a lot of people have adopted some of that. And you're looking at the ability of a 3D printer to print anything. Right now, you can print your own chocolate bar. There's a chocolate printing 3D. There's a 3D printer. And they actually have a technology convention in Johannesburg, which is all chocolate statues, which is a chocoholic's, dream come true.
Sure. So now, again, tell us, what will this 3D printer look like?
Well, several 3D printers, they're all different. You've got huge bioprinters, which, of course, 3DD, the company 3DDD Printing, have. You've got bioprinters, you've got regular household printers, you've got printers that will print chocolate. There's all kinds of sizes and shapes. There's amazing other printers, which we'll probably talk about a little bit here, but that print houses.
Fascinating stuff, because you kind of wonder if you can 3D print a house, how big would a printer like that look?
Well, I don't know, but I know in Southern California and in China, they print 10 homes in one day.
Wow.
We're talking a 2-3-bedroom home printed. And one of the things that's unique is the contour printing that's going on. The University, I think, of Southern California has this huge robot which pours concrete. It's called contour crafting. It will pour a house in 24 hours.
Well, how about that?
Oh, yeah.
And you think about, too, because we've actually talked a little bit about 3D printing on the program, is how little waste there is, so there isn't a reason to charge as much, for instance, buying a home. could be relatively inexpensive for a really nice-looking quality home, as you were talking about.
Oh yeah, I mean, instead of being slave to a mortgage, you'll be able to print your own home for under a really nice home, anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000. And so that is the most amazing thing that can happen is you'll be able to get a printed home customized to how you want it. But think about not just a home like that. If we were able to, and we are, by the way, if we were able to take some of these printers with the Red Cross and go to a disaster area, we could print shelter for disaster victims, like, immediately.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing you were talking about, too, was the fact that we can 3D print organs. How does that work?
I'm not quite sure how the 3D printed organs work, but I think there are new bioprinters that actually will encode, stem cells and DNA into the organ. And when you think about it, the beauty of that is, why do we have problems with people having transplants? Well, the problem is that the transplants are from someone else. They're not customized. But what if you could customize your own transplant with your own genetic information? Then the likelihood of you rejecting this organ is less likely. So that in itself will also save lives.
Now, that's interesting enough. Are they doing that now? I mean, has there been success with 3D printing an organ and actually putting it into someone and seeing how it works?
Behind the scenes, no one is talking, but the truth is, yes, they haven't inserted it into a human being, but they have printed them, and the organs are actually functioning. It's almost like the movie. If anyone's seen the movie Bicentennial Man,
okay, right.
What he does is he has what's called a positronic brain, and he can stay alive forever. But he loves his wife, who's human, and so what he does is he creates these amazing functioning 3D organs to keep her alive. So that's really what we're looking at.
That's fascinating. Now, what has it been like as you put your book out there and people start talking to you about 3D printing? What are some of the questions you've kind of found yourself answering?
Well, that happened the other day, actually yesterday. I had a young man ask me, what is your feeling about 3D printers? Do you think they're evil? Do you think they're good? And I said, I can't say one way or another, because I can tell you that the fact that it's less expensive to print a home for the homeless than to continually pour money into taking care of the homeless,
right.
I think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. The fact that you don't eventually, you can minimize trafficking of organs because organs can be printed. I think that's a wonderful thing. Now, the homes, I would love to have a home under 5,000 to 7,000. I don't want to be, be held by a bank to continue paying a mortgage. I'd rather pay it off and own it.
I know, isn't that nice to think that you can get all those extra hands in the middle that drive up the cost of a home in the first place, get those out of there and just have the relationship of just buying the home.
Exactly. But the fun thing, Daniel, is those extra hands also need jobs, and they'll be out of work.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like somebody actually has to get educated about what they're going to do with themselves, right?
Exactly. That's funny.
What are some other things about 3D printing that excite you, for instance? I mean, you kind of look at guns and people go, okay, well, how's that going to stop or slow down crime? You take a look at being able to print 3D chocolate, for instance, and it reminds me of that movie, Forbidden Planet. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but there's an interesting scene where the guy who's apparently, I think, the cook on the ship, has ran out of bourbon. And so what happens is the robot kind of does an analysis of the molecular structure of this bourbon that he wants. And he says, I can actually make that for you. How much would you like? 65 gallons? And you kind of crack up laughing, but the robot goes and makes the bourbon for him. And so he's starting to drink this, and he's realizing, well, it tastes great, but it's not giving me the effect I'm used to having bourbon have. And so, you begin to think, especially with something like 3D printing, when it comes to, for instance, printing food, you have to ask yourself, will it have that level of effect like it would if it was found naturally?
Well, you can customize the food to have certain things, but nothing can customize Mother Nature. You can get as close as you possibly can, and there'll be people, for example, this is part of the vision. In the near future, people that are on food stamps will be able to order their printed food and get them printed at the food banks. That's going to be really big. So that means that we're not going to have people that are hungry. Hungry people in another country would happily eat printed food rather than no food.
Mm-hmm. I guess that would certainly make sense, wouldn't it?
Right. But, you think about it, it's not the best thing. One of the reasons why the book is about 3D printing, and that's an amazing subject. But 3D printers are going to be the saving grace, but they're also dangerous, as you can hear. But think about 3D printers and working together with something natural, like 3D printers working together with the permaculture society. Right now, one of the hidden veils, I had a critic who just wrote something about the book, and I've really been spared because I've been really lucky. People have been saying really good things about the book.
Right.
And one of the things he said, aside from this is the critic, his name is Leon Michael Jones from Los Angeles, and he said, aside from the fact that the book references 8 to 9 companies that will make owning stock in Apple years ago look like chump change, the book resonates more broadly as a veiled denunciation of injustice and a veiled affirmation of the truth. So what exactly am I saying in the book? Well, part of it is 3D printers are changing your life. So everybody please wake up, and if you really thought about having a legacy or a fortune or in the future, you need to take a look at these companies that are in the book. The other thing is, this is actually a veiled way for people to get together and do something to help stop Monsanto. Now, I'm not going to say what exactly I recommend in the book, but it's really amazing. The answer is really simple, and some of it's already started. So the beauty is that it's actually planting the seed for us, literally, and I say that in a humorous way. It's planting the seed to stop Monsanto, part of it. The other part is that I address things in the book with 3D printers. In the storyline, aside from the fact that, I talk about our lives and what our lives look like with 3D printers, all of a sudden, I'm sitting, in the year, 2017, and I'm printing an outfit that years ago, maybe because I'm chubby, I wasn't able to print it in my size. Well, now I can customize the size. I can print it in my own home with my own printer.
Mm-hmm.
So
you kind of wonder about the future of money then.
Actually, yes. That's a really good way of looking at things. There's a professor who talks about how our jobs will be changing, that 3D printers in the future, and he's in the book also. I think his name is Prehoff. He talks about how 3D printers will be working with the permaculture to create kind of like a new society where people will have jobs that they really like as opposed to jobs that they feel forced to do. So we're looking at some of that going on, but just think about it every day. And you get on the computer and you want to buy something. Well, if you want to buy a pair of Gucci or a Gucci purse, you'll be able to print a Gucci purse on your own 3D printer.
Well, how about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, even better. I mean, I love frou-frou, and, we've got this amazing woman who just graduated. Her name is Margaret Choi, and she graduated from Harvard, and she's an amazing, brilliant woman. She's also an incredible hacker, and she prides herself in saying that. And she just took a 2D Hewlett-Packard printer, and has the information online for people to hack that printer and turn it into a 3D printer. She's also one of the people who just created an amazing 3D printer, which is really going to give the cosmetic industry, a belt, a kick, because her printer will print makeup. We're talking nail polish, foundation. You can go to Photoshop and customize your eyeshadow color that you print in your house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of take a look at this and how it removes a lot of what could be called middlemen, and you kind of wonder, what are these people going to do?
Well, that's an excellent question. There's going to be amazing, amazing jobs opening. And as with anything, things that can be printed also need to be assembled and inserted. So you're not going to replace things like, okay, for example, dentists, instead of sending out 4 crowns or bridges, they'll be able to print their own in their own office. So that'll speed things up. You've got people who, one of the jobs that's going to be opening up, I believe in the near future, is just a job for people that assemble things. Daniel, have you ever had anyone in your family who you always envied, who you had over for Christmas, and it's the kind of person who reads instructions and puts things together?
I think a lot of us have somebody we know that's like that actually takes the time to read the instructions to put something together.
Exactly. Well, that's what's going to happen. People will be able to, so yeah, you'll have lots of construction workers out of work because of contract crafting, thousands of people, but those same people can put things together. They can assemble things. Things will need to be assembled. I see really these agencies hiring people that have the skill of putting things together. The homes are printed, but they have to be put together by somebody.
Yeah.
And so boats, yachts that are printed, they have to be put together. Flooring that's going to be printed, that has to be put together. Someone's going to have to manage not just the printing of the food, but the packaging is going to have to be put together. And all of this is going to be going to create jobs for us, unless, of course, we start developing robotics sooner, then people will have a lot of jobs that will be open because of 3D printers.
Right. Now, the other thing that gets curious, too, is because you were mentioning earlier in the program the printing of drugs, and obviously we could move toward a recreational approach to this, again, printing particular kinds of things. I mentioned earlier about bourbon, for instance, and you start thinking, well, when are the so-called people, the government, for instance, going to step in, and when are those decisions going to be made about the regulation of what we are allowed to print in the private sector versus, who gets to decide what to print in a more controlled situation? Again, you talk about drugs, you got pharmaceutical companies. You can see, well, if you could 3D print a particular drug that you might need that's just out of your price range, now you can actually print this drug out. Why would you need the pharmaceutical company anymore? Well, you know how it is when drug dealers just don't have the opportunity to have a direct relationship with their customers. When somebody's cutting them out, what happens? So what's going to happen there?
Well, what you're looking at is the government has stepped in, actually, when it came to printing guns and rifles. There was this young man who was an attorney in Texas. And I lived in Texas, and they're beautiful people, and I understand that they always wanted their independence of the United States, and that's great. But this young man actually was into printing rifles and guns, and his printer, I think it was a MakerBot printer, was taken away by the government. They actually went and took the printer away and forbade him from printing guns. But you can do that so long. I mean, the Yakuza in Japan, we're not talking just criminals. We're talking high-tech, really cryptic kind of criminals that have amazing software engineers working for them on this issue, and they're printing guns. I'm not kidding that the Yakuza really are doing that. And it's just, I really don't know the particulars of their printing drugs yet, but I know the bioprinters are doing that, and it's just a matter of time before they get their hands on one of those. Can the government stop people from doing this? Not really. They can and they can't. As long as there's an open source on 3D printers, and people like Margaret Choi can hack the Hewlett-Packard and make the 3D print, the government is not going to have as much control over that. I mean, they can have somewhat control over certain things, but to actually stop people, to stop the criminal element, I don't know. I don't know how they'll be able to do that. I know they did with guns, but I don't know if they're going to stop, people from printing their own prescription drugs or. So it's going to be an iffy kind of situation. I hope so, because no one likes to think that somebody's printing some virus somewhere.
No, we certainly wouldn't want anything like that. Nothing more than our government being able to create something they feel that we need to be protected from by them. Well, you created it in the first place,
Exactly.
I kind of, laugh a little bit, about this whole Ebola nonsense. Like, that was something that was a hot zone back in the 1980s, and all of a sudden, Ebola, I mean, don't you think that's a little odd, this particular disease, causing people to scratch their heads? What had happened? Did HIV disappear? It's just silly sometimes the things that I think occur out there, and it's probably true. I don't know anybody by me who has Ebola. It always seems to still be over there, I guess, in Africa, but there's been, a person here and there in the United States. But, you think about some of these things and you wonder, are these being created just so the government can step in and say, look at how we're protecting you? It leaves you shaking your head sometimes. What's next? We're going to get like a Republican-Democrat disease or something like that? I don't know. I'll tell you what would be interesting. There is a fascinating movie out there, and it actually was created, I believe, in 1979. Michael Crichton, and it's called Looker. And I never even heard of this movie until a few years back. A friend of mine was talking to me about it. And interestingly enough, if you go on Netflix, you'll find it. They have it. But what this is, it stars Susan Day, and if most people remember the Partridge Family, she was the oldest sister. And she stars in this movie, and what it is, it's a look into the future of where they actually CGI'd actresses. So you take a look at your daily soap opera, maybe it's General Hospital, okay, and you've got a leading star on there. Well, what was happening in this movie is these leading stars, generally the women, were dying. They were, I don't know if it was murder, homicide, whatever, but they were just disappearing. And what had happened was, is they would literally 3D print these actresses, then they created a CGI version, and then they would off the real version. Now think about that. You're eliminating the actors union. You don't have to worry about providing health insurance or paying this actress anymore because it's a virtual actress. I don't see how 3D printing is too far off from a vision that Michael Crichton had back in 1979.
You hit it, Daniel, on the nose. That is, as soon as we're done with this interview, I'm going to go and I'm going to watch the movie because that is exactly what's happening. Cloning is not something that anyone doesn't know about. We know that cloning has gone on, and we just don't know the extent of it. Now, cloning and 3D printing are going to be going hand in hand. So how much does that government hand do they have in it? I'd say they're whole up to their elbows. I'd say literally that they can, and they probably can and will be able to 3D print a human being. But I think that before they actually print a whole human being, I think what's going to happen, and that's in the book, is they have to take the particles of the human being and reassemble them. In the movie Willy Wonka, we have something called Wonka vision. And there's this little kid who's really naughty who goes to see Willy Wonka. He got a golden ticket, and he's always watching TV. Well, his name is Mike TV, and in the movie Willy Wonka, you see that he's taken into this movie screen and transferred like television, his particles, and then reassembled somewhere else. And I think before we print a human being, we're printing, animals and things like that. And yes, we can actually clone people, but I think you're going to be looking at transporting people, just like Star Trek, just like the Wonka vision. I think that is going to be something that we need to look at seriously. If it isn't going on yet, it's going to be going on very soon.
Right. I know the television show Eureka actually showcases that as well. I believe it's in the third season where one of these scientists had managed to save her consciousness. And what they were able to do is they were able to assemble a bio body and infuse her consciousness into that, literally bringing her back to life, but in a new body. It's still her body, so you're back to that 3D printed human again. But you kind of think about something like that, because, for instance, cloning, you might get an exact physical replica of something, but you don't get the exact replica of something, because generally, life finds its own way to morph and evolve in its own way. So if they were to, say, clone you, that second you is going to be much different than who you are, just based on experiences, your imprinting, all those different things. So you imagine if you're able to take a consciousness and put it into a printed body, what are some of the implications of something like that? I mean, there's just a lot of interesting ways to look at all of this, and you wonder, is technology beginning to run a little too fast?
I think that technology is running the way it's supposed to, because humanity has many, many, many needs right now, and those needs need to be fulfilled. For example, food. If you can print food for people that are hungry, well, yeah. I mean, it's not the best food, but it's food. If you can print homes, and you don't have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, you can just print a home for a homeless person. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Where exactly does technology, where is the humanity in technology? That is where we have to give it, our touch. It's like we're cooking soup, and you have to add a pinch of this and a pinch of that. Well, you add a pinch of 3D printers, and you add a pinch of the permaculture to work together, and then you add a pinch of this and a pinch of that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. Is there a website our listeners can go and find out about getting a hold of the book and more about 3D printing?
Yeah, they can actually go on Amazon and look the book up. It's INKD, and that's Island Nancy Kite David Inked, and it's on Amazon. It's for sale on Amazon right now, and I'll be doing some book signings here pretty soon, which is kind of fun. Actually, I'm going to be going to Dublin in June. I've been asked by one of the newspapers to come out and hit some of the bookstores out there, because in the book I also address, and I barely address it, but it's important. See, many things aren't taught in our schools, and the white cargo trafficking of the Irish women and girls, now that's something that people really need to remember, because that's vital. There's a lot of black Irish. Well, how did they get to be black Irish? The story tells you exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. Evelyn, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program today. Is there a website people can visit with you?
Yeah, they can. Well, they can go to my website, evelyneaglesong.com, and they can email me, or they can send me an email to inkdinked.thebook at gmail.com. They can send me messages there. But they're going to have to, by the way, they're going to be competing with Rose, which is one of the characters in the book. And Rose is an Irish bomber from the IRA.
Ah.
And honestly, Daniel, I can tell you, this is the funniest thing and experience I've had as an author. What's happened is the characters have come alive. Once you get to chapter like 4, the characters are alive. And Rose, after I finished writing the book, was asking me for a sequel. And I was like, Rose, you need to calm down. I just had this child, this baby, and I'm not about to have another baby anytime soon. So I started to wonder, who's really writing this book? At first, I started to write it, and then the characters were writing the book. After a while, I felt like a secretary, really.
Well, you know how 3D printing is. It starts coming to alive and pushing people around, so.
Exactly, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, but you can go on Amazon. You can get the book on Amazon, INKD. You should be able to get it in Powell's, hopefully in the next couple of months. We'll have to wait and see. Oh, and the fun thing is, I've got the story I sent out to Devlin. He's the director of Leverage and many other movies like Artificial Intelligence. Mm-hmm. And he's actually California and Portland Bay, so I sent him a copy of the book. And then this week, I have my publicist sending a copy out to Steven Spielberg. So hopefully we'll see a movie out about this soon, about my book. So I'm hoping that's going to be the case.
Well, there you go. Evelyn, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today.
I love it, Daniel. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You better believe it. So there it is. The future of 3D printing, well, it's here today, so find out more. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.